as well today. And also Behnam Ben Taleblu, a senior director, the senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, who has been up to the very minute on what's happening in Iran. And believe it or not, all of this is pretty much connected in some way, shape or form. So let's start with Venezuela. Alex just set it up pretty well. We're hearing a lot about Delcy Rodriguez, of course. Now she has this change in tone. Also, we want to look at some of the other players. You know, you have the Interior Minister, a man by the name of Diosdado Cabello. He's also named in the indictment that Maduro was, just seeing a federal judge for. Talk to us, John, about how the back channeling happens now. They can come out to their, optics, the people in Venezuela. But it does seem like, so this doesn't spiral out of control, that there has been some work and things being done by the Trump administration. There's Cabello to make sure that the people who were there have leverage over them, including folks who may want to come up and be the next dictator. Talk to us about where this goes in the next few weeks and days.
Well, first of all, the Trump administration did their homework here. They understand that they have leverage. The template, this is not Iraq in 2003, where you are literally replacing everybody in charge, putting in our own administration and doing it by gunpoint. The analogy here really is Japan in 1945. After the Japanese surrendered, we governed through Hirohito, and our footprint in terms of troops wasn't small enough to actually impose our will on the Japanese by end of 1945 or 1946. We governed through, left the people in charge in Japan, but we governed through them. That's the analogy. That's what's happening here. And as you said, the Interior Minister's under indictment now, and a deal's been cut with him saying, hey, you play ball here, you have nothing to fear from us, which is why President Trump pardoned Hernandez, the president of Honduras, to set a precedent so that these bad guys would know that there was a way out and an off-ramp. And nobody understood it at the time, but that's what happened. And that's the deal that's being cut here. Otherwise, a resumption of strikes and cessation of oil trade for Venezuela and impoverishment for this already very unpopular regime.
It's interesting, as you mentioned, John, the Honduran president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, did get a pardon. He was, for a brief time, at the jail in Brooklyn, where Maduro is heading back right now. So he didn't take his chance to leave and get exiled. He continued to do his little dances, and now look how it's turned out. But Behnam, let's talk about also Venezuela. The reality is huge Chinese influence, $60 billion. He's meeting with a Chinese delegation hours before he's plucked out of his bed by special forces, but also Hezbollah. Iran really had a foothold for decades here, and now we're seeing uprising in Iran. This is the Chinese delegation, but it's so critical because it will be underreported as we all track Maduro this week. But what's happening in Iran, make no mistake, is also sending a message that we can find Maduro, we can take him out. If I was Khamenei, I mean, you're looking at this and also the unrest in your country. What happens there?
It's great to be with you, Bianca. Listen, that's really the million-dollar question right now. Because if you were the supreme leader or a member of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, you see Trump's track record. You see Trump 6 years ago this month killing Iran's chief terrorist, Qasem Soleimani. You see Trump 6 years ago supporting Israel in decisive military action and destroying Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity. And just a few days ago, you see Trump actually decapitating the Maduro regime of Venezuela. So there is ample evidence here that Trump will follow through on his threat to stand with Iranian protesters. A reported 20 plus have been killed already. One wonders what the actual threshold for that may be. But no doubt the regime is sweating, and no doubt there's great connective tissue with this, because it's not just Russia and China that have had a state partnership with the Maduro and previous Chavez regime. It's the Islamic Republic of Iran. And Iran just lost its sole state foothold in the Western Hemisphere thanks to Trump's decisive action.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And in 2022, Masha Amini, the death of that beautiful young woman for not wearing a headscarf, did have other protests. So now we see a revival of that very young population there in Iran. But let's put the pieces together and talk about oil. And I'm kind of just so over those in legacy media saying this is about regime change or this is about Trump wanting to control oil. He says he's going to sell it to China. Of course, there's a lot of people who are looking at Russia as well. And there's an economic angle to this, John. As an economist, walk us through that. But also the fact that Russia had a lot of military equipment that they were selling to Venezuela. Complete embarrassment of what just went down, including, I love the buzzing over Hugo Chavez's grave as well, just for a little extra oomph, a cherry on top, if you will, as they left.
Yeah, welcome to 21st century warfare and statecraft. This no longer law enforcement is no longer distinct from economic or military. Oftentimes you have the nexus or juncture of so many of these different aspects of conflict coming together. And Venezuela is a prime choice. We had Hezbollah in there. We had the Russians selling Venezuela a lot of armaments. You have the Chinese trying to get a foothold in our hemisphere. And you had the exporting of millions and millions of dollars worth of drugs, and you have energy all rolled up into one country. You mentioned mentioned Russian armaments. Maduro felt very safe underneath the Russian S-300 systems, the Buk, and he also part of their integrated air defense systems. And the Cubans were very impressed with all of the armaments and resources that the Venezuelans had. The Cubans are Venezuela's poor country cousins, as it were, militarily. And the fact that we went in there and defeated those systems again, and I say again because we did that with Iran as well. This is a real embarrassment for the Russians, who've made a big deal out of a lot of their air defense systems being one of their bigger export prizes throughout the world, and see them fall on their face so completely in Iran and now Venezuela.
No statement yet from the Kremlin officially. Behnam, let's talk about the UN and the hypocrisy there. You had Ambassador to the UN, Mike Waltz, there talking about the illegitimate election. Even the EU didn't recognize Maduro. And then we also have to point out December 11th, just weeks ago, the UN said that Venezuela and Maduro were doing criminal crimes against humanity. But today, the smallest violins come out for the UN. Tell us why, when it comes to Iran and what they're doing there, the UN doesn't seem to cry foul at all.
Yeah, unfortunately, some international organizations like the UN, never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Some of these things are not right or left or Democratic and Republican. There are issues of right or wrong, both morally, strategically, and politically. And unfortunately, the UN has missed the ball here. The UN does, fortunately, still have a fact-finding mission that I think both the U.S. and its European and Western partners need to support through greater funding, so that we can have greater clarity into what is happening right now when it comes to the current human rights violations and massive crackdowns. So there are ways to kind of work through the system, because lest we forget, if we get up and walk away from that table, the Russians and Chinese will fill the vacuum when it comes to reporting, not just votes, like they are already. So when it comes to the UN, things can always go from bad to worse.
Just want to bring it back here to something happening in a few hours, John. As an attorney, some on the left have been questioning the legality of all of this. You've got the meeting at 5:30. Hegseth, Marco Rubio, and others will be in front of those on Capitol Hill, the Gang of Eight. But when you look at sort of the arrest warrant, he was indicted back in 2020. That's what was carried out. But the words President Trump used, saying we are running Venezuela, and the talk about Cuba, the talk about Greenland, that's also fodder for those who are saying he just wants to take over everything. How do you write some of the messaging that's coming out of the White House and where it goes from here?
Well, first of all, this is a law enforcement exercise. U.S. courts don't care how a defendant gets in front of them, as long as the warrant and indictment are proper. And here they are. There's precedent for this with Manuel Noriega 30 years ago. With regard to us running Venezuela, we still have the ability to decide which tankers go in and out to neutralize drug boats. And the new regime in Venezuela is going to have to decide what kind of relationship they want with the United States. Keep in mind, the Maduro regime, the people in power in Venezuela, they're not ideologues. They're not fighting for a 1,000-year-old religion. They're fighting for money, fear, and power. And that means that they're relatively easy to incentivize. They're very unpopular, and they know that, and they're going to need an off-ramp, because they know that the current state of affairs is unsustainable. And that's what President Trump's offering them. That's his leverage. And I think you'll see a remarkable warming in U.S.-Venezuelan relations in the coming weeks and months.
I think it's already started today with Delcy Rodriguez's comments there. John Jordan, Behnam Ben Taleblu, expert analysis. I appreciate you both, gentlemen. I hope you come back and see us very soon.
Thank you.